Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and Steve Bannon, the man behind me, is a really big influence on what goes on during election season. And if you think that he's out of the game, he is very much not out of the game. And Robbie Martin of MediaRoots.org got at me with an interview he did on Vice. And he said, you should check this out. I think it's really interesting. And you know me, I listen to both sides. I'm always interested what political operatives, especially outward ones like Steve Bannon, are up to. So I did, Robbie. I went and checked this interview out. We're going to talk about that interview. We're going to talk about Jim Jordan. We're going to talk about really the Republican Party and what happens from here with this impeachment inquiry that's going on. I liked Bannon's line about a pound of flesh, especially. But we just had somebody who gives a voice to people like you and us taken off of YouTube, and apparently the official reason is one of his sponsors and saying that he didn't have a license to sell vitamins of some sort. It was some, like, I don't know, Eddie Bravo tweeted it out. I could go check it out. But Sam Tripoli and Tinfoil Hat banned out of nowhere, no strikes before this. And a lot of people, Robbie, are worried about the 10th of December.
What's the 10th? What's the 10th of December? I'm completely unfamiliar with that, but I just want to say, Sam, we're rooting for you. Hope you get your YouTube channel back. This new era of the internet fucking sucks, and it's really a shame that this is the new internet we're living in, where you get arbitrarily taken offline for, basically BS reasons. Most likely because Sam is putting out thought that's unacceptable within the sort of the mainstream realm right now, or what's allowed. So that's very likely why his YouTube channel was taken away. We've already seen traffic for even people whose YouTube channels still remain decline significantly, demonetized. In your case, Jason, sometimes your videos get demonetized. And I think even Corbett Report was the guy that you just did a great segment with about Snowden. He was one of the first people to be targeted in this sort of crackdown on the internet in general. If you remember, he was actually labeled, his website was listed in the Prop or Not article that ran in the Washington Post right after the 2016 election. And that was really formative for what's happening now. And I think a lot of things, whoever that shady organization was, whether they were an intelligence cutout or whatever, a lot of what we're seeing now emanated from that mindset. And it continues today. I mean, 3 years on, it keeps getting worse. And gigantic channels like Sam's, who gets hundreds of thousands of views within days of him uploading videos, can arbitrarily. Shame, Jason.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to me, Robbie. I don't understand how any of this can be justified. Once again, he's a comedian, and for him to be taken off is very alarming. And what I'm talking about with December 10th, I actually did a segment with Press for Truth and Dan Dix about it, whose entire channel has been demonetized despite 250,000 subscribers and 13 years of work, and him basically being really, whether you agree with Dan or not on these subjects, he's on the ground. He's a guy that really goes out there, goes to these events, gets interviews, all that stuff. He's an on-the-ground reporter, and for him to be completely demonetized is crazy. But now, on December 10th, the new terms of service says they can terminate your channel just for not being commercially viable. And who gets to decide what is commercially viable? A lot of people are worried about this thing about the children, the FTC, the $40,000 plus fines. And yes, that is alarming. We definitely covered that as well. I mean, who's to say I do a video on Disney child actors who have been molested, which I have done, and Bella Rose, I put a set of Disney ears on her, and now my thumbnail may attract children. Can I get a $40,000 fine for that, even though I've specified that there is no video on my channel that is meant for children? Zero. I don't aim for children. This is, adult and semi-adult content. I'd say PG-13, because at the worst, what are you going to get? Me string along cursing? You know what I mean? If you don't think a 13-year-old has heard somebody just blast off, there's no real sexuality here. I'm not taking off my top. I'm not being suggestive. I'm not calling for violence. All these things that are against the terms of service. But commercially viable? I don't know that Jason Burmis has ever been commercially viable, Robbie.
Well, for a good reason. I mean, that's a badge of honor. And I think back to that I don't want to get too stuck on this topic because I know we're supposed to talk about something else, but I think back to that incident where that woman went to the YouTube headquarters. It was actually quite close to me. Was right outside of San Francisco, and she shot up the offices there. And interestingly, what I found very interesting about that, Jason, is her reasons for getting so outraged at YouTube. As, of course, deciding to commit violence on YouTube employees is obviously an insane, completely overboard thing to do. But her reasons for getting so outraged I actually thought were pretty understandable. She was mad because she had done exercise videos on her YouTube channel where she showed a little bit of skin. She was wearing like yoga pants, and her rationale was, why is Nicki Minaj videos allowed on YouTube, but my videos get flagged and removed? When I'm just wearing yoga pants and doing yoga on the floor. So, I mean, it's completely arbitrary. People who have a lot of money behind them, obviously a lot of clout, a lot of, big people behind them are not going to get banned. And that's sort of what an example I keep using when I argue with people on the left about this idea that hate speech needs to be removed from the internet. That's the reason that they use for Alex Jones. That's the reason that they use for even someone who I despise, like Stephen Molyneux. I think he's a total fraud and a charlatan. But at the same time, if it's about hate speech, why does Breitbart and Fox News still have an internet platform? And why is the left not creating an outrage campaign to get them banned? It does sort of reveal a different underlying reason for the rush to ban people like Alex Jones. It's these big-backed right-wing figures, Turning Point USA, Breitbart. Nobody's calling for their banning because they have huge financial, power behind them. And they're part of the establishment as well. So it really does sort of reveal sort of what's actually going on here, I think.
Well, Robbie, I couldn't agree more. And there's kind of like this weird paradigm. I was just actually approved this week, Robbie, for memberships. So now YouTube is saying, yes, I can have the $1 to $5 tier, the 5 to 15, and then I think it's the $20 to $100 tier memberships. If I offer this other content, I still can't get a Teespring store attached. But every single one of my videos is demonetized out of the gates. However, if I'm not talking about Epstein, you can take a look here. Look. My Epstein videos here, no. Anything Epstein off. But otherwise, this week, you really scroll down. I'm literally, other than my live stream with Dylan, which you popped in on, after manual review, everything else I talked about is now monetized after they kind of take that push away. Let's see if we've been demonetized yet. As you see right there, we're live. We can check it live, Robbie. Let's see if you're just too controversial. We said the wrong keywords. We have. And you can see once again, I will request a review manually right now. We are less than 8 minutes deep in the conversation. We've really said nothing controversial. Nobody is cursed, but we're up for manual review. That's the business plan they have for me. Robbie, MediaRoots.org.
I did say the F word, so
you bastard.
It might be my fault, yeah.
I doubt it. No, I doubt it. The F word doesn't really matter much. Trust me, a lot of my stuff where I go off on crazy curses gets remonetized or doesn't get flagged at all when I'm doing walk and talks. I think it has a lot to do with the algorithm, the IP address, the software. Who knows what they're doing over there? MediaRoots.org and a very heavyagenda.com are the websites. There's also a great YouTube channel, but today we are talking Steve Bannon. He's about to launch his own War Room show. I was wondering if he was going to carry Owen Schroyer. It doesn't look that way. It looks like he's doing his own War Room with Newsmax. Robbie, he's expanding into the game to try to become, I think, more of a personality and not such a behind-the-scenes guy. Not that he's really behind the scenes. He had his radio show and his following. But I think he's trying to put himself out there. What are your opinions on this latest interview, the upcoming elections, and then we'll just go from there.
The reason I found this interview so interesting, Jason, is because I've been, watching this distracting clown show of the impeachment hearings, and it's interesting to me to mostly be paying attention to the way the Republicans are reacting to it right now, because their job is sort of to defend the president as much as possible and to double down on defending him of any wrongdoing whatsoever. And the whole idea that he did anything impeachable, I think that it's not convincing yet to me that he did. But but I think it's interesting what Steve Bannon raised in this interview is he is sort of saying, like you mentioned at the very beginning, they're taking a pound of flesh from Donald Trump. This is an actual real impeachment inquiry. The Democrats aren't just going to give up all of a sudden. This is a very serious thing. And what's interesting that Steve Bannon, what he's saying is a big contrast to the way that most of the Republicans, at least most of the pundit class and people on Fox News are acting right now. They're sort of acting surprisingly flippant and sort of cavalier about the idea that these impeachment hearings are taking place in real time. And I find that kind of fascinating because Steve Bannon, his former advisor, is saying this is deadly serious and Republicans need to get their act together and essentially get better messaging down, because the messaging right now is basically really disorganized, and that if they can reroute the narrative to something that Trump actually ran on. I don't take his campaign rhetoric at face value, but if we go back to his campaign, one of the big planks of his campaign was sort of no nation building, no new wars, making friends with Russia. So as Steve Bannon was trying to say in this interview, is that he could have really used this as an opportunity to return people back to one of those main planks of his campaign and say, hey, why does Ukraine deserve hundreds of millions of dollars in aid to buy weapons? This is dangerous. This can escalate a conflict with Russia. Ukraine has neo-Nazis in their actual military ranks. If you lefties and liberals are so concerned about neo-Nazis, why do you want to send $300 million to fund an army that works with literal neo-Nazis? When I say this, I am not exaggerating, not being hyperbolic. The A's.
He's going to say something about the ACLU. I am so sorry about. I
guess they don neo-Nazi imagery. Are you still there, Jason?
Yeah. We dropped you for a second, but let's talk about it. Let's talk about a lot of the points that you made right here. Okay, first of all, I think he was really smart in this interview to talk about how Pelosi was very intelligent and say, oh, we're not going to impeach. We're not trying to impeach. Don't run on impeachment to other people that were coming into Congress with that quote-unquote blue wave. And we saw a little bit of it, right, in Congress. They overtook the House. We saw that. So he said, look, that woman's cunning. She knows what she's doing. And the thing is, when we talk about, he talks about his populist agenda, right, and his non-interventionist stuff. And you're right. Why isn't he running on that instead? But he makes it very serious. I think when she continues to try to push Russiagate, he was right to say, listen, they had 40 subpoenas and nobody spoke. I would have liked him to say, when she was talking about, well, who did it? And he was said, well, we could have found out if anybody looked at the servers. If we're talking about that aspect of the investigation, right? I guess there were many aspects to the Russian meddling, but especially the emails themselves and where they came from, no one even looked at the servers. I would have loved to hear what she had to say there, but there were a lot of talking points. My biggest problem with Bannon is, like you said, that rhetoric, right? He's talking about non-interventionism. Maybe Trump really wants to do this, Robbie. Maybe Trump wants to find a way out of Syria and the Middle East and all that. But you can see they've given Israel everything. Even Netanyahu is using kind of the same talking points that Trump is now that he's been indicted. It's a coup. I would actually agree with Trump that it is an attempted coup. But even if when he talks about the pound of flesh, I think he's really saying this too. Look, when we talk about that pound of flesh, we're talking about a situation where that administration is so tied up with not being thrown out of office, right? From the very beginning, even before they're there, that how can they really push forward on any kind of foreign policy? And I think that is by design. Again, you look at the people he's put in. I don't think Pompeo's a good guy. I don't think Bolton was a good guy. I think Mattis is actually a monster. I can't stand it when they talk about this and how the entire intelligence community agrees, Robbie, that this happened. And then they provide no evidence whatsoever. The intelligence community doesn't have the best record. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, we know Russiagate was a fraud, and that it was something that was sort of designed to, maybe at the most unseat Trump from office, which was obviously unsuccessful in doing, but at the very least to delegitimize Trump's presidency. It has a similar effect, but a greater effect and a more dangerous effect than sort of delegitimizing Obama's presidency by saying that he wasn't born here. It has instilled the American population with such a deep paranoia. As we've seen, we were talking about at the beginning of this podcast, it has resulted in a crackdown of the internet to stop Russian disinformation. This is a really, really damaging situation, and it amounted to no, real serious indictments on Donald Trump or anybody that worked for him. Yes, people went to jail or got charged, but even as we saw with these recent Roger Stone charges, Jason, or his conviction rather, is that the original allegation that he had some kind of back channel to WikiLeaks is still not proven and still false. Yet that's why he got wrapped up into that. So his actual conviction was based on lying under oath, basically perjury,
and witness tampering, and that's it. Yeah. And lying under oath to Congress who's never been fucking honest about anything in their lives. Why in the world would I be beholden to somebody when I was just exercising my free speech rights? That's the craziest thing. That this whole thing really escalated after they lost the election. And they moved the bar, Robbie. They moved the bar to all of a sudden talking to anybody outside of the United States was basically espionage and treason and election meddling. No one ever talks about what we do. I mean, the United States is involved in a lot of countries' election meddling and bought off dictators and regime changes even beyond the Middle East. I mean, you look at what's going on in Venezuela, in Bolivia, even in Hong Kong to some extent. Our intelligence agencies have fingerprints all over them. I mean, in Iran, when all of a sudden Iranian banks are being burned down and they're not owned by the Anglo-American empire and the IMF, you have to ask your question why that's happening, Robbie.
Well, absolutely, Jason. And I try to avoid, being reductive about it and just going out first with the idea that these protests are being spurred by the U.S. But you wait maybe like 24 hours when these big protests start to find American fingerprints all over them, and to find direct linkages. For example, you're just talking about Hong Kong. One of the main media figures who's sort of opposition media in Hong Kong is this young kid. He's in his early 20s, and he's regularly meeting with Bolton, Pompeo. I mean, it's very strange how there's not more light on that. So you'll see a lot of leftists, for example, like on my Facebook feed, promoting the Hong Kong protests, but none of them ever talk about how the guys they're celebrating are actually meeting with some of these extremely crazy right-wing Trump administration officials. And yeah, no, it's a really big problem, Jason. And I want to remind people here, and I think Bannon actually knows this, and he's not even willing to talk about it. But I think what Bannon did in this interview that was interesting is he's peeling back some of the layers and zooming out a little bit from the current Republican framing. Because as I was saying, the Republicans are acting very surprisingly casual and confident about what's going on right now, considering that an actual impeachment inquiry is happening. Bannon is taking a different approach. He thinks Republicans should be taking this more seriously and use it as an opportunity to push what he calls an America First foreign policy agenda, which is essentially sort of an anti-intervention foreign policy agenda, and to use that framing as a device to explain why we shouldn't give this aid to Ukraine. It will escalate war. This is not an America First policy, in his words. But I think what people should do is zoom out even further from that. And it's interesting to remember, and you brought up Trump's loyalty to Israel, Jason. And I think this is a very interesting moment that most people forget, is the Republican Party itself in the summer of 2016 and in the spring, they hated Donald Trump. They were terrified that he started cleaning up the primaries and winning. They were terrified that when it came down to even Ted Cruz and Trump, they were like, we don't want either of these guys. Like, we would prefer Rubio or someone else. They were really panicking. And I think it wasn't until Trump actually went to the AIPAC convention and basically pledged his loyalty to Israel that he was able to get the backing of Republican mega donors like Sheldon Adelson. Because before that, this is a really interesting timeline that I think needs to be explored more, is one of the top GOP donors, Paul Singer, who's also a neoconservative, who owned the Washington Free Beacon, was actually the original funder of Glenn Simpson's Fusion GPS opposition research project on Trump before the DNC actually started paying for it. Now, a lot of Republicans will like to say that there's no evidence or linkage between Paul Singer and the Republicans trying to get Russian dirt on Trump because the Chris Steele dossier was written after the DNC hired him. However, Jason, if you read any history about Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS, Glenn Simpson had already concocted his own Trump-Russia collusion theory in the early 2000s. He had been tossing this theory around DC for a long time. So I find it very odd that a Republican neocon mega donor like Paul Singer would hire Fusion GPS and have no interest at all in constructing something like the Steele dossier. But yet we're led to believe now that it was just the doing of the DNC. Now, the reason I'm saying this, Jason, is because I think it's very clear that at a certain point, the Republican establishment decided to make friends with Donald Trump after this huge rift had basically expanded during the primaries. And they needed to have that unity. And this could be illustrated very clearly with someone like Lindsey Graham. Look at how Lindsey Graham was talking about Trump. He was literally calling Trump like a neo-Nazi on television. And now he's his best friend. They need to have this appearance of sort of faux unity. And I think Trump also needs that. If he finds that very valuable, but it also presents a problem where you have this, you're working in this narrow framework where you're only blaming the Democrats for what happened. So this IG report that he's about to announce or, release, that's about the Democrats meddling in the 2016 election to undermine his candidacy. I feel that people should not be holding their breath that it's actually going to undermine the deep state. And I say this because it's, if it actually institutionally damaged the CIA, it would cause a major shitstorm in DC. I mean, so if Trump is willing to actually wage a real all-out battle with the CIA, then I could see Bannon actually getting an indictment for his potential involvement in the 2016 election. But you better believe that'll be, I mean, if this is already a deep state turf war that we're seeing now, it's going to escalate to levels that will even shock us if Trump lands an indictment on Bannon. So I'm saying this because
I think doesn't that look where it's going? I mean, it looks that way. I mean, he looks pissed. Here's the thing, Robbie. I watched George Kent and his opening statement in these Ukrainian impeachment inquiry hearings, and they sell it like it's already, we've impeached the guy. We haven't. This guy, in his opening statement, not only was it really about policy and how Trump kept undermining our national security with the Ukraine, but he literally, Robbie, invoked both Zbigniew Brzezinski and Henry Kissinger and their policy in the late 70s and 80s. I cannot shit you. Like, in his closing of his opening statement, he was talking about how great they were. And personally, I want to be the furthest fucking away from the policy that empowers the Mujahideen and the Muslim Brotherhood to go attack through our proxies, Russia, start a war there, and then turn them into the enemy 20 fucking years later so that we can go to the Middle East for 18 plus years without question. Like, that's their policy, guys. That's the grand chessboard. And for him to even invoke that, and most people don't understand that without the United States and its quote-unquote meddling, the Ukraine wouldn't have been broken into two and would still be a part of Russia. They're part of the Soviet Union before that. We really fucking pissed them off with that move. And again, most people don't understand that they are now encircled by NATO nations. And that threatens them. That's why they are so behind Syria and Iran, because they're not part of that group. They need those allies. It's an intricate game, Robbie. And from what I've seen in this impeachment inquiry hearings, like I said, I don't think it has teeth. It'll probably, again, because of where Congress is, it'll get to the Senate. It'll get thrown out from there. But Bannon is right on the pound of flesh. I think, again, he's gearing up for an election season, and they want their establishment guy in there. That doesn't mean we're getting anybody out. We're not. But like you just said, on behalf of kind of like this Israel Saudi alliance in the Middle East. We're going to continue on, but it's going to sound nice that we need to get out. It's going to sound really nice maybe for the next 6 months. Iran's kind of been pushed into the background. Nobody talked about the shelling of Palestine and Israel back and forth in the media in this country over the last couple weeks before this Netanyahu announcement. It's almost not announced. I mean, am I wrong on any of this stuff? I mean, you look at it, and I feel like all we're going to get is a song and dance routine. The Trump administration will utilize guys like Bannon behind the scenes, but I got to tell you, I don't know that he has the base if he doesn't, I don't know, get rid of Roger Stone, or commute Roger Stone's sentence. A lot of people will see that as kind of an attack. I mean, he didn't do anything for Manafort. He turned on his lawyer once they went in there. I guess they kind of turned on each other. But the other part of that is, who the fuck are the Democrats going to run? Grandma Oatmeal can't win an election. Now they're pushing Pete Bootlicker as the guy that's going to win the Iowa caucus. Sounds great in his establishment dude, but he ain't going to win an election. The only person that is electable up there, I mean, I guess you could maybe argue Yang, but they certainly don't want Yang in there, even though he toes the Russia line and every other Democratic talking point just because of the UBI and how it might shake up the system, but is Gabbard, in my opinion. And sure, she's got her faults. You know I just went on a 5-minute rant there, but that's what I see as the future. What do you think? I don't think Trump's beatable, not because he's good, not because his message has been brought, but because the Democrats don't have anybody.
Well, I mean, I think even if we're just isolating it to the idea that Trump is a television star, a seasoned celebrity sort of performer, that alone puts him in a whole different category than everybody running in the Democratic primary right now. I mean, I was watching the last debate, Jason, and I just kept thinking during the most boring moments of it, frankly, the parts where it was just like, God, this is excruciating to watch.
Oh, we lost him for a second. Hopefully he'll be back in a minute. God almighty. Go ahead.
But can you imagine just Trump entering into that stage in the middle of all those people, and his energy would just...
And we lost him again. Why, Internet? Why? What is going on?
Are we still... Where did I get cut off?
Trump on the stage and the energy there.
No, I was just saying, I mean, Trump's energy, as we've seen, Jason, is just so intense and powerful that it would trounce everybody and overshadow everybody on that stage, including Bernie and Tulsi. Neither one of those people stand a chance against his bullish sort of, you know, he's the guy on The Apprentice. I mean, he did WWF, Royal Rumble. I mean, these people don't do those things. They don't have that experience, you know? So I think that's really important to remember. It doesn't matter how much Trump is messing up or how stupid he looks on a day-to-day basis. He still has that. Whatever that is, whatever you want to call that, it's something unique. It's something special. It's something I've never really seen any other politicians have before. So, you know, he's still got that. He's still got that. And I mean, I think what you said, no, everything you said, I mostly agree with. I mean, I think I differ with you on Tulsi. Mm-hmm. But I think that it's really interesting that there is, you know, there could be some kind of, you know, the QAnon narrative right now is basically saying that this IG report was a long time coming, that it's Trump gunning for the deep state. He's about to indict everybody. And that they're saying impeachment was done as a result of this. So the sort of the conspiracy framing right now is that there's some kind of shell game going on between the quote unquote deep state and the Trump administration, where they're sort of threatening each other with different things. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting theory to ponder, because does the timing of that line up? Are some of the Democrats and people from the Obama administration genuinely worried they will get hit with indictments? I think that's something that, even though, you know, most Democrats are just writing all this crazy stuff off as conspiracies. Oh, Donald Trump's a conspiracy theorist. I mean, it would be really interesting to see if any of those people are genuinely worried right now about what's coming for them, because there is a lot of evidence, Jason, as you know, that there were shady things done to Trump's 2016 campaign to spy on him, to you know, get FISA warrants on him, whatever. These were all shady.
And we were losing him again. We're gonna wrap it up after this, guys. But yeah, no, he's not. He's right. Listen, they were.
And if Trump actually does wage, use his Justice Department and William Barr to do this, it's going to shake up D.C. in a really serious way. It's going to shake it up more than we've seen so far. And I think that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And we've already seen an FBI lawyer who's being criminally investigated right now for forging some aspect of a document to get one of the FISA warrants on the Trump campaign. So that's already been reported yesterday. So we'll just have to wait and see,
All right. The websites are mediaroots.org and a veryheavyagenda.com. A Very Heavy Agenda is also your YouTube page, I believe. Right, Robbie?
Yes.
Anything else? You want to tell people how they can support you?
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say thanks, Jason, for having me on. I really appreciate you letting me do these spots on your show. You've been doing some really great work recently. Everybody check out Jason's segment with Corbett about Snowden. Is excellent. It's an unexplored topic, I think, these days, because Snowden's kind of considered a celebrity. And people can, support me at patreon.com/Robbie Martin, because now my entire YouTube channel has been demonetized. But I'll still do streams on there. And you can follow me on Twitter at Fluorescent Gray.
All right, Robbie, once again, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to have Robbie Martin. We love to have different voices here, and I really like Robbie's voice. Doesn't mean I have to agree with him all the time, but that's kind of the point. I didn't have to agree with Sam Tripoli all the time, and you don't have to agree with me. Guys, you can check out all my stuff for free, all my films, Loose Change, Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, and Shade the Motion Picture right here in the documentaries playlist. We're doing it 3 to 7 times a day. I got to do something about this bandwidth. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm making calls. I'm changing gear. I'm going to replace the router first, and then I'll replace the modem after that if I have to, and call them up. But if you want to support me, thumbs this up, share it with others, hit that subscribe button, join the Burmese Brigade. Let's get to 40,000. We're over 37K right now. And $5, $10, $15, it means the world to me. No Patreon, no Subscribe Star, none of that stuff. Simply a GoFundMe every single month. And I got to tell you, I know I said that by month 12 I want an office. I'm kind of looking at one right now. I don't have a lot of money, but I'm thinking, if we can maybe even reach that $5,000 goal this month, I might even be in the game in the next couple months, possibly by the beginning of January, to have an office. We'll see. I'm not promising anything, but I'd really like to do it. Guys, I love you, and I'll see you on the flip side.